I'm going to be interviewing one of the most decorated mascots in history.
This 3,000-pound beast was totally in control of me. And when I got on that thing, it was just solid muscle.
I mean, you were jumping through rings of fire. You were riding motorcycles in an outfit you can barely see.
I think the best part of it, though, was being able to create moments for fans.
Spirituality and capitalism belong together. Those thoughts, those feelings, that comes from something bigger than I am. And together I believe we can all grow. That's how we're going to change the world. That's how we're going to change the planet.
Thank you again for joining us today on the Spiritual Capitalist. I really appreciate you coming out. I'm really excited about this interview because, or maybe this conversation more than anything, when I was a kid, so I'm 45, so I was a kid in the 90s, and I remember watching this guy when we went to the nosebleeds of the Utah Jazz, right? My dad was a huge jazz fan, and I got to see this crazy guy that was in this outfit of a bear that would get to the top of the stadium, like in the nosebleeds, and then take us a perfectly good sled and slide all the way down to the court. Now, what a lot of people don't know is at that point in time, when I was a kid, I decided to do the same thing. My parents were out of town. I open up the door. I open up the door to the house and I push open the screen door. It had just snowed. I took my sled. I got to the top of the stairs.
That's awesome.
And I slid out right into the lawn. I was like, and it felt so cool to be able to do that. So I got a little injured. And what I noticed for you is that you've had now 12 surgeries. 13, oh, excuse me.
I mean,
27 torn ligaments. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, I'm looking at my notes here. And you've literally almost died, what, 5 times? Something like that, at least?
Yeah. I got a good guardian angel.
And you missed 5 games in 25 years.
Yep.
One of the things that I was looking at your history is I believe that ADHD was your superpower. Like, I truly do.
Okay.
But what drives a person to go through that kind of pain?
The love of what you're doing. And I mean, because I truly did. I loved what I was doing. And I firmly and just fully wanted to entertain the fans. And I always went out there. So Grant Harrison was my game operations vice president at the time. He's the one that hired me. And so back in the day, I was traveling a ton. I was doing a ton of road shows. I was doing a lot of appearances. And it started to show on my in-game appearances, my entertainment. And he came back one time, and I was just exhausted because I did a road show on Monday, flew in Tuesday morning, did a home game, flew out Wednesday morning, did a road show, flew back in Thursday, did a home game, flew out Friday, did a road show. And that Monday game, I was tapped. And I remember sitting in the back. Grant comes in and he's like, "Hey man, what are you doing?" And I'm just like, "Grant, I'm just so tired." And it was, and honestly, this is when it kind of hit me. He just goes, "Listen," he goes, "I get it." And he goes, "But there's a lot of people, that have never been to a Jazz game. They've, probably this is their first and only game they'll come to all year because they can't afford to be here." And he goes, and I know that they've heard about the bear. Is this how you want them to remember the bear? That, he was non-existent out there and stuff. And I remember that was that moment where I went, okay, it makes sense. That's what drove me, is knowing that I felt part of the team. The other thing that was amazing is, back in the Jerry Sloan days, being able to have access to the locker room like I did, access to the players like I did, they made me feel like the sixth man, and that's why I did it. It was just a lot of fun. And I really, really did feel like I actually helped. Whether I did or not, I don't know. But I really believed it, and I had to believe it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have pushed myself so much.
Because just to paint a picture, you were doing things because, I talked to people about, hey, listen, I'm going to be interviewing like one of the most decorated mascots in history. And I tell them about you. And a lot of people these days don't remember, you know what I mean? They don't remember that kind of mascotting was kind of boring in a way, but you were taking it like Evel Knievel stunt style. I mean, you were jumping through balls of fire. I mean like, rings of fire. You were riding motorcycles in a in an outfit, right? Like you can barely see. And I think that you were doing things that nobody had ever done before. But like, why would you push yourself to do things that have no one ever done before versus just entertaining? I mean, you could have pushed it like, you know, I'm just going to give it just enough. Like, I'm going to give enough to people to be entertained. But there was nothing about you that just wanted to do kind of.
Well, you know, I think a lot of it is, so back when I started, I was copying the San Antonio Coyote, you know, just some of the guys that were already there and the Gorilla. And I realized that when I did a good skit, and people would be like, "Hey, that skit last night was great." I couldn't take credit for it. You know what I mean? It was like, well, that's awesome and I appreciate it, but that's not mine, you know? And when I did a skit because I saw Bob, the old Phoenix Gorilla, do something and he did it, I did it, you know, it might have worked in Phoenix, but it sucked in Utah. And all of a sudden I would die on their sword, you know, and I hated that. And I just didn't want to copy anybody. You know, like I wanted my own path, and that's where it all came from. Is, you know, we started out. There was only a few of us, and you know, the Gorilla was athletic, the Coyote was funny, and I just needed my own path, and that's where it started. Is I wanted to do my own thing, and so that when I succeeded, and when I failed, I knew it was me. You know, it wasn't because I was copying anybody.
I can relate.
Yeah.
I can relate. Like you want to create something from a place of authenticity, something that's genuine, something that you can be proud of, right? Something that you can say, oh, I created this thing versus somebody saying, oh, I just copied this thing. Right. Which, because you came from a small town, you were a farm boy, right?
Yes, sir.
And from what I was reading, that you were a mascot in college, is that right?
No, sir.
You were not a mascot in college. I misunderstand that then.
So I wasn't a college mascot.
Okay.
I was going to school, believe it or not, to be an attorney. I was pre-law.
Okay.
You can see where that went. But when I was going to school, I started coaching at a gymnastics facility called American Gold Gymnastics. And a Fargo team or a CBA team came to town called the Fargo Fever. And they showed up at our gym and asked if anybody wanted to be the mascot. And everybody pointed in my direction. So that's how it started. And I started doing the CBA back in the day.
Oh, that's how it started then, huh?
But I was in college, yeah.
Okay, you were in college, okay.
But then I was working CBA. And then that led to...
That's why I misunderstood it then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I got fired halfway through the season in Fargo because I was bungee jumping and sledding down the stairs back then. And they thought I was going to kill myself or kill somebody in the crowd. And they were just like, way more than we wanted.
What? So with the insurance possibilities of obviously costing a whole lot of money if you get injured or costing the team or so on, why do you think the Jazz took a risk on you?
I didn't think they realized what they were getting. You know what I mean? And they, you know, I don't know. That would be a great question for Grant. Because when we did tryouts, you know, there was 8 of us. And they were from all over the country. And you know, ASU gymnasts, great tumblers, great performers. Eli the Fly Akins, he ended up going with the Globetrotters after tryouts. But, I mean, he could hit a mini tramp and grab the top of the backboard. It was insane. So there was so much talent. But when the team had sent out the requirements for our tryouts, there were 5 things listed. You know, it was dancing, stunts, crowd interaction, tumbling, and dunking. And I was one of the only ones that did all 5 things. Wasn't good at any of them. I was just good enough, right? Everybody went out and just did their strong suit, and then they were done. But I was the only one that did all 5. So
you were more of a character at that point in time that had a range of talents versus just one talent, it sounds like.
Yeah, but it wasn't like I was exceptional at anything. It was just,
right.
I was just good enough to get by.
So here's what I believe is ironic about all this. You're willing to jump through flames. You're willing to go off of jumps. You're willing to do, I mean, just the most insane things. Plus, on top of that, you served in the military for 6 years prior, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank you.
But yet you try out to be a mascot. Everybody calls you back, and yet you don't call anybody. Like, you're the most fearless human being that I mean, literally fearless. And yet you don't call anybody back. Why?
I was scared.
You're scared of that, but not the other things.
Well, it's different. It's like, because like you said, I came from a small town, East Grand Forks, Minnesota, northwest corner of Minnesota by the Canadian border, small town. And when they called, I didn't really even know, anything about Utah, Salt Lake City and the Jazz. My other option was going to Seattle because when they had the tryouts, there were 3 teams that called, and I didn't call anyone back. So then, and Sacramento was the other one. And in the end, I was too afraid to take that step. You know what I mean? Which was just stupid of me. But I mean, and I really think, and I'm just saying, God has a reason for everything, because I think if I would have taken made a choice, I was going to go towards Seattle. And thankfully, I didn't call anybody, but Grant Harrison called me. And he asked if I took a job with one of the other teams. And I said, no. And he goes, well, what are you doing? And I said, I don't know. And he goes, well, why don't you come out here for a year? So I mean, I really do. I believe that there's a plan or there's a reason for everything. And I think that was the reason, is just, he told me just to wait and it'll happen. And Grant called. So it was the best decision without making a decision.
Yeah, there was years ago, I was sitting in a ceremony, and I've had a lot of fear in my life, like most people, right? And then something never occurred to me. And when I say this, it's going to be like, oh, duh. But it never occurred to me that when you're afraid of something, like you think, oh, I'm the only person in the world that's afraid of these types of things. And I remember asking a guy one day that was a world, like he loved climbing these like really intense mountains. And I said to him, I have a question for you. And he goes, what? And he goes, when you're standing at the edge of the mountain and you're going to climb this mountain, it's going to take you days. Aren't you afraid? And he's like, yeah, of course I am. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're afraid? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, how do you get over that fear? And he goes, I just put one foot on the mountain or on the ledge, and then I put another foot, and then I put another foot, and I just keep going, right? And I would think from a lot of ways, people would think, wow, I couldn't see this man being afraid of things, especially picking up the phone and calling somebody when you're doing these amazing, amazing stunts. If our listeners have not seen Jon, like go online and you can see a lot of his highlight reels from many world records and many receiving a lot of different awards for being one of the top mascots on the planet, like multiple times over. What, 5 times over?
For Mascot of the Year, yeah.
I mean, that's what, world record? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not but it's.
Well, it's. I mean, when I say world record, I mean nobody else has won that before that many times in a row, correct?
Correct.
So the stuff you were doing was something that nobody had ever done before, and you also were a major advocate for mascots and still are to this day. Like, so I kept thinking about this a lot, and I thought, okay, you're a mascot for years doing this, and yet you cannot speak. Like, you're a man behind the mask that nobody knows. I mean, even now today, I'm sure someone doesn't walk up on the road and they go, you're the Utah Jazz Bear, as much as, say, Karl Malone would walk up and be like, oh, you're Karl Malone, right? How was that to have no voice for so long?
Probably a good thing, because if you heard me, like we were talking earlier, the TED Talk that I did, I sucked. It's like, I don't speak well. And honestly, I liked it. I think, being able to just not have an identity. The only thing people can recognize is just the bear, just like Santa Claus, and I like that. I hated when people found out who I was. And I feel that when you give a voice to a character, it takes away from that character, And I love the fact that people love the bear, and I could hang it up and just be me on the side. Because,
right.
And you've been out with players and stuff, is when you go out with players, they're constantly being hounded for autographs, or, people are always coming up to them. And all the times that I'm out, back in the old days with Ostertag or Carl or John, when those guys, we'd go to dinner or something, they were always getting, hit on. And I'd always be like, God, these guys don't get one night to just be alone and just eat dinner. And so I enjoyed being able to hang it up and just walk out the arena. My other favorite, though, was when I was walking out, I loved, because I'd be in the crowd and I'd love just hearing people talk about, what happened that night. And my favorite, because I really, Andy Kaufman, right?
Yeah.
I loved trying to do that type of comedy, where nobody knew if it was real or not. you know, because you see a lot of other mascots and they go out, they do their skit, and it's a skit. You know, it's a skit.
Right.
I loved walking out and people going, was that real or not? You know, or, you know, did that really happen? Or I can't believe that happened. And I knew, you know, that I succeeded that night, you know, at kind of smoke and mirroring the whole crowd. So
Because I was going through my meditations and I thought, okay, a lot of times I see when people pick careers or they pick a job or they pick a business, right? There's some form of a trauma that we're usually hiding behind. And I thought, wow, what a perfect place to hide behind is a mask, right? Like if you think of any character in history, right? Like I was like, oh, what is it that you say that for yourself, if any? Maybe there wasn't, but was there anything that was there insecurities inside yourself where it was just a lot safer to be behind the mask? Or was it just simply that, hey, listen, like this is easy for my family and myself? Or
yeah, it was just easier for my family and myself. And it's just way easier, you know, because I felt like Peter Pan, you know, I felt like this 10-year-old kid going out and I could do anything I wanted, you know, technically for the entertainment purposes and get away with it, you know, by popping cannons or climbing this or doing that. You know, it was just like, I don't know, you walk into a place and it'd be fun to climb that, or it'd be fun to jump off of the suites, or it'd be fun to, and I could do it. And as long as I was behind the costume, I felt like the bear. You know what I mean? I felt like I was this character. But when people saw me and they knew who I was, and there was a number of times where I'd be going through the crowd and I'd see somebody that was either a neighbor or somebody I knew, I immediately froze, came out of character, and I'd be like, oh crap. And I'd go and then I would never go to that section the rest of the night.
oh,
Because
really?
they pulled me out of my character.
Got it. Got it.
So-
So a lot like method acting in a way then.
Yeah, ton. Yep. Just like
Wow.
that.
Long time to be that character. I would just think the psychological pull would be so unique from that perspective, right?
Yeah.
But nothing like what I thought. Like nothing. It's interesting to think what my perception was of someone hiding, like I thought, hiding behind a mask. And you're like, no, man, it was like me being Peter Pan, like the most magical place on the planet,
Yep.
which that's awesome.
I think the best part of it though was being able to create moments for fans and people, you know. My favorite part was getting dressed early, going out and being able to find special needs kids or families or, you know, just anybody, and be able to bring them on the court, introduce them to players, you know, and do stuff like that.
I love that.
So it was just a ton of fun.
Which the perfect segue into that, because I was reading that there was a point in time to where you were working with the Children's Hospital, and you were up at the Children's Hospital, and you came home from the Children's Hospital, and you were just so angry at the pettiness of some people about what they were concerned about and what they were worried about versus these kids that were, you know, in the Children's Hospital and potentially dying at that moment in time.
You know, so I got called in a lot of times, and I got to go up and it was hard, you know, unfortunately to see these children that were sick in the hospital, you know, and over the holidays and stuff like that. And I got a couple stories on that. Is like one that I saw. I remember the players were out of town. I couldn't get anybody, and I called Matt Asiata from he was a running back for the Vikings, and I said, hey, would you come up and just chat, you know, be with me. So I was up there and he came up with me, and I remember I was down visiting a room and I was going down to where he was, and this nurse came out and she was just bawling. And I was like, what's going on? So I turned the corner and I look and I see Matt leaning in, and this little baby with little mitts on her hands, you know, so she couldn't scratch herself, you know, and was just kind of batting his nose and giggling and laughing. And all the nurses were crying because that was the first time that baby had smiled, they'd said, and that she'd been there for 2 weeks, and all she did was cry and she hurt. And it was just the fact, you know, seeing Matt, you know, changed her whole perspective. You know, it might have been for 3 minutes, but at least for 3 minutes, that little child was able to, you know, laugh and not think about what was going on. So, I mean, those were the cool moments, is being able to take them out of the situation that they're in, you know, even for just a brief moment, you know. And then another one, like you were talking more towards freaking out on somebody, is I remember I got called to go do an event, and We were out in Tooele, and I didn't know what it was. My assistant didn't really know what it was. We were just supposed to show up. And in my head, I thought it was like a birthday party or something. So we show up to the door. I got my confetti cannons. I'm loaded with silly string, and I'm getting myself hyped up. So when they open the door, I'm just bursting in. It's going to be confetti cannons and silly string. And the door opens, and I look, and the grandmother was standing there. And you could just see she was super sad. And I looked, and I had my cannon in my hand. And you know how like you're just slowly taking it all in. And I'm looking around the room, and I see the grandfather and the mom, and they're crying over here. And it just took me a minute to start piecing it together. And then the dad came over and called me in and explained everything that was going on. And over to my left, Steve, he was a little 10-year-old boy that was passing. And I remember going in, and it was so hard because I never take my head off, and I never talk, and I never come out of character. And, that was one of those where you're just like, screw it, So I went over and I sat with them, and we were there for a little over an hour, and we just sat and talked, laughed with the parents and laughed with him and told stories. And, the hard part, I think, was when I walked in, they looked at me like do something, like, is there, like, in a weird way, that's just kind of what you felt. It was just like, they thought like, do something to help here. And, that was so hard on me because I wish I could have helped some way, somehow got him better, but all I could do was just sit and talk with them and tell stories. And then I remember we left, and then Luke and I were driving back, and we were both crying. And I remember showing up at the soccer game that my daughter was playing at. So I went over and was watching her, and she was about halfway through the game, and all the parents were sitting there. And all I could think about was how fortunate I was that my daughter's out playing, healthy, happy, and enjoying, life. And there's this poor boy that's 10 that's about to pass. And I was listening to the parents, and they were all yelling about, bitching and moaning about the refs and yelling at their kids and boom, boom, boom. And something brewed up in me, man, and I just lost it.
Oh, wow.
I told everybody to shut blankety up, and I remember just screaming about how, just be happy that your children are out there playing and they're happy and healthy. I just left a 10-year-old boy that's passing, and it just all came out. And nobody said a word for the rest of the game, I swear. And I remember just standing there, and I was so angry because I think people get too, like, they forget how fortunate, the little things are in life, how fortunate we are to have those little things in life, just watching your kid play. And they forget what the rest of the world is dealing with a lot of times. And I don't know, that one was hard. And then the crappy thing was about an hour after that game, Luke called, and he had passed him. So that's what sucks.
Man, because you did a lot of that work, like a lot from my understand.
As much as I could.
Really? When did that start for you? Because, here you are, the mascot, and then all of a sudden you're doing a ton of community service and working with all these nonprofits, even though the Jazz is telling you, hey, we only need to do a little bit of this stuff. You're like, no, I'm gonna go out and I'm going to really do everything I can in the community. Where did that start for you?
It was probably year 2 or 3. And what I realized is, because I love this job, or love that job, and I really did feel blessed, and I wanted to give back, and my way of giving back was to go out and help in the community, and I really did. It was as much for me as it was for them, as I got that joy out of it, to be able to have a vehicle that could support charities and help. And I just remember going back and forth because, and it's not the team's fault, because they didn't know how to handle a mascot at the time. All mascots were pretty new. So they, were doing the best they could. And in their mind, if we have them doing 3 charities, was what they said, we're doing good. But in my head, I was like, well, if I'm doing 3 charities, that means I'm maybe doing 3 to 5 charity events a year. And I wanted to do more. So I was going out doing charity events and then getting caught on TV because cameras would be talking at this event and I'd be in the background or something. And then I'd get called in and They'd tell me not to do it, and then I'd go out and do it again, and then they'd call me back in. Until one day, it just blew up, and we had a pretty intense meeting. And by all means, I probably should have been fired. But they finally said, okay, fine, you do it. And I think they were, they just didn't know what to expect and what would come from, one of their brands being that involved in the community. And I think that was, that the charity work, being involved in the community was one of the best things that ever happened with the bear.
I agree. And looking at the numbers, from what I understand, is that it increased between the bear, between the stunts you did, between what you were doing in the community. I mean, it was like 13% more in addition to ticket sales because of that, which is fascinating to me, which does tell me that doing the right thing, doing things that you believe in, following your own intuition, usually most of the time pays off.
Yeah, well, it does, unless you have a team that pushes back. I was really fortunate. Is I try to, talk about this with some of the guys when I go to conferences and stuff. Like I said, I should have been fired, for months, disobeying and going and doing charity work. But there comes a point where you just, like, when you really believe in something, like you truly believe what you're doing is right, it's hard to just turn away from it. And, it just took all of us sitting down and us and talking and explaining it, and where we want to go with it. But that was hard. Is that there was a number of times where I just firmly believed what I was doing was right, and just trying to convince the Jazz to see that. You know what I mean? Because there's a ton of times, and it happens a lot, I'm sure, in management, where somebody might fully believe this is exactly what we should be doing and this is going to benefit everybody, but you have management that is just going to put their foot down and say no. So then you have your choice. I'm going to do it, and I'm risking getting fired or let go, but at least, I'm doing it for what I believe. And I was just fortunate the Jazz just let me do it.
Yeah. What was a crazy stunt that you did that they didn't want you to do, that you were like, no, we're going to do this, and you did it anyways? I love that smile. That tells me a lot.
There's just, I think the scariest I've ever been doing a stunt was when I rode bull, a professional bull one time, because I didn't know what to expect. Everything I did, I was in control of. This, 3,000-pound beast was totally in control of me. And when I got on that thing, it was just solid muscle.
This was your idea?
It was Days of 47 idea.
Okay.
So this is the hard thing. So, and I tried to avoid it, but it always happened, is when somebody asked me to do something, that ego that the bear has, it's like, the bear's invincible, I could never say no. Like another example is I was up doing Nitro Circus with Travis Pastrana and those guys. And their world-class mountain bike guy was going to come down the ski jump and jump off it. And Travis comes over, the camera's with him, and he's like, Bear, you got to go. And I remember looking, and I looked at him, and in my head, I'm like, I'm going to die. And I'm just like looking at him, and I go, okay. And, I'm like, yep. Really? So we go up, and I'm sitting up there with him, and I'm trying to get the bike just to go over the lip, and I was getting hung up, and it took me like 3 times, and Travis looks, and he goes, this might have been a bad idea. And I go, you think? I was like, dude, I never ride mountain bike, let alone down a ski jump. But it was one of those where you just go, I in my head, it was just, I couldn't ever have the bear, like, not take that challenge, not do something. It was, you know what I mean? Like you said, the method acting, but I just couldn't do it. So anyway, I went down. I wrecked so freaking hard, dude. I cracked the helmet inside my head. It was a hockey helmet. I hit so hard, my helmet cracked, and I remember everything was shaking. It should have knocked me out. And I got up, and if you see in the video, I just grab, I don't remember his name, but I grabbed him, and I'm yelling or talking to him. I'm like, don't let me go. Don't let me go, because I couldn't stand up, and everything was just spinning. So, yeah, it was stupid. But those were the like more stupid ones that I did. But
yeah, because people are pushing you, and you can't say no because the ego is so big of the bear,
right?
And you can't let the fans down. You can't. I mean, What an interesting perspective, because you're seeing the character from one perspective and you're seeing yourself from another perspective, and you're making decisions based upon the character
Yeah.
versus based upon your own personal good, which is why obviously now you're paying for it. Um, we talked off camera a little bit, and that was that you gave so much to the Jazz. And we talked about a lot of people in general giving so much to the companies and giving so much to the dream. And that a lot of times people are painting you the dream, which happens a lot in corporate America, happens a lot in jobs, but painting you the dream. And then the moment that they decide that they're done with you, that you're disposable. Like, what do you think other people can learn from that? Because, it's occurred, it's happened, right? You
Yep.
gave so much of your lifeblood and your body and everything to this character because you believed in something much bigger than, unfortunately, management believed in.
Right.
What do you think people can learn from that?
Well, one is a job is a job, period. And I mean, and like we were talking, is if you look at all the other kind of celebrities in Utah, like we were talking about, and all of them being let go the same way, and just the pat on the back and thank you, and you're out the door. And I think people get, this delusional thought that, they care, and there's going to be fireworks in this retirement party. It's like, it's not coming, and like I told you, and I tell everybody is, with my prior management, we had worked out a way to go till 65, how it was going to all be laid out. It was going to be great, but then new management comes in. They just don't see it the same way, and you're done. I think if I could say anything, I'd be, remember what's important, and your job is not important. I mean, it is important, but don't put it first. It's just a job, and they always say, you should be living your best life, and living your best life isn't giving your soul and all your time to a job, because once you pack your little box and walk out the door, they're already looking for your replacement. I think the most important thing, and I've talked to you about this, is the one thing I missed and I screwed up on, because I was selfish with that job, is my family, and family is the number one thing that people need to be, focusing on and creating that strong bond. I've been out 7 years, and I'm still trying to build that relationship with my girls because I was so absent.
Hmm.
It just it's tough, and just relationships are the other thing that you should be focusing on. Your friends, just building relationships that will help you grow as a person. Your job, I don't know. It's hard to explain now that I'm on this side. I wish I could see this, because then I think I would have capped out the bear. I kept thinking there was more, and I was just not satisfied, but I should have been. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a couple questions I have on that, but I think, yes, I do agree with what you're saying.
Yep.
But you're a guy that was looking for greatness. You're a guy that's slaying dragons. You're a guy that is trying to do something that no one has done before. In order to do that, in my relationships personally, there's always a price that we pay for things.
Right.
So you're an entrepreneur now, right? Like, you've got your own businesses. I believe you told me you have like 5 businesses. You do a lot with Mascots, and you're helping a lot of people that are in events right now to be able to make sure that they have all their merchandise and so on. With you, how many staff members do you have right now?
Like workers?
Yep.
8.
How do you make sure they don't make the same mistakes you made by giving too much? Because it's your dream, right?
Yep.
They're building your dream. I mean, really, that's what's happening. How do you make sure that you're consciously aware that they're building your dream and that they're not giving too much? Because I don't know the fine line on this one. And this is one I toy with all the time, is like, quote unquote, balance.
Yep.
I don't really believe there is balance. I believe that there's a zag. Like, sometimes you're really into the business side, other times you're really into family, and other times you're really into innovation. And it's this back and forth thing. And there's a price to pay for all of it. But there's also a price to pay by sitting on the couch and not doing a damn thing as well. Right? Like, so no different. There's a price to pay for freedom. So how does that work with your staff members?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is because I know what has happened to me. Whenever they need something, have an issue, need to stay home, I'm always just like, just do what you need to do And and always I'm always telling them, like, hey, if it's a family thing, go. I don't care, and the thing that I'm catching myself doing is, staying later to make up for them so they can be gone and doing their family stuff.
Right.
Because I really did. I missed out on a ton, and I hated the fact that I'd be missing my own kid's birthday party because I was out doing somebody else's birthday party or
Oof.
else an event. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's it. It hurts almost, because I was being the company guy, and and like you said, trying to get to, bigger, better things, the dragons or whatever you're saying, like growing. But no matter if I would have gone to another level, I would have looked to go more and then go more, and it would have never stopped. And that's what is hard is people need to understand that you just need to get to where you're like, look, I've accomplished what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to accomplish was to make the character of value. I wanted it to be valuable to the team, valuable to the community, and I had done that. But that's where I feel that's where my selfishness came in, is where I want to make this bigger. I want to keep this getting better. Did the team care? No. Did my family care? Yes. They wanted me home, So, I mean, it was selfish. It was me. And it would have never stopped. I don't care what anybody says. It would have never stopped. I would have kept trying to push, and I would have kept sacrificing family over my job like an idiot.
So it probably eventually killed you, literally.
Literally, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have literally killed you, because if you kept pushing, there's a point in time where there is no more to push, right? That price that we pay for trying to do something no one's ever done before.
Yeah.
And yes, the ego gets involved with it. And yes, and it's that fine line, it's a fine line, because if you look at basketball players that you're around these athletes, you're around people that are practicing and doing the same things that you're doing, from a perspective of giving up time and giving up a lot of quality time to be with, the people they care about, versus being with the team and practicing and making sure that they are able to get those, those 3-point shots or the slam dunks or whatever it is, or be able to make sure that they have that good defense. I mean, you're around superstars. You're around Karl Malone. You're around John Stockton, among many, many, many other people. I think it kind of goes with the territory a lot.
Yeah. I mean, they do get paid more.
They get paid an astronomical amount more than what
they
you
get
got
paid more, or their careers are way shorter. That's for sure.
That's true.
But I mean, it is the same. They are gone a lot, and they do have to sacrifice, but they do have a window at the end.
I think that's different. I think it's different.
And, you look at Ostertag, and he was so smart in how he did his contract. And I don't know. I mean, if I could do it over again, that's what I would do. I would just be happy with where I got, and would have focused on family and relationships more. But, would have changed anything? I don't know. I mean, granted, I know I can see those moments like where I did something and jacked myself up and went, oh man, I'm going to feel this one later, and I sit and think, well, would I have changed it? Would I have not done it? And I don't know, like I used to jump out of the suites and I'd land on the floor and boom, it would make a big bang. And I remember giggling. I don't know why I would laugh at the stupid injuries. My ankles would swell, just huge, and be black and blue. And I'd have to wait weeks until the swelling went down. And I'm sure hell I'd jump out of the suite again. Boom. And they'd swell. But it was, I don't know. I wanted to entertain so bad. And I wanted to make sure that I was just doing everything I could, on behalf of that damn bear. And I should have stopped the first time I saw it swell and realized how much damage I was doing to these ankles. So.
Yeah. Well, you had a lot of fun doing it, right? I mean, it sounds like it was a ton of fun doing it. It was a lot of an experience. And I know in the beginning, we talked about a little bit how ADHD is your superpower. And the reason, and we kind of went a little bit off, but the reason I was thinking about that is because when you were younger, your mom didn't know what to do with you. Nobody really knew what to do with you. And I don't think anybody knew what to do with somebody that's like, hey, listen, eventually in my life, I'm going to be a mascot. I'm going to be jumping off of perfectly good suites. I'm going to be, driving motorcycles in an outfit. I'm going to be jumping through hoops of fire and be doing all these things. I believe that you took something that where people couldn't control you, right? Because your mind was so active, you were doing so many things, and you did turn it into something that is, I mean, highly rememberable. Like, I don't think anybody could see those performances and not let them stick in their heads. Like, I still remember them. I'm 45. That was a minute ago, you know? If there's kids out there right now that you know they have ADHD, which you know there's a lot of them, and you know they're a lot like you, what advice would you give them?
Well, you know, with ADHD and where I struggled is, you know, when it really comes out is when you're doing something that isn't stimulating your brain, isn't something you love. You know what I mean? Because I still remember getting called, or my mom getting called into school, and I was sitting outside the door, and all the teachers in the school were there, and everybody that had to deal with me. And I remember hearing my mom, "What do you want me to do? Put him to sleep?" And I sat there and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm not a mean kid. I was just,
Right.
you know, I would just catch myself sitting out on a window ledge during class. You know, I was just, I don't know what the hell. I just was all over the place. But when I found something that interested me and something that I wanted to do and loved to do, I mean, I was zeroed in and I did it well. And, you know, being able to do you know, that's why law school was not my forte. So God was looking out for me and definitely shoved me in a different direction because I wouldn't have been a good attorney. But mascotting let me be creative. And ADHD kids are super creative. And I really feel that that's where I'm struggling right now is the creative part. This guy called, he was with a marketing company just the other day. And we were talking about ideas for his marketing with some of his big companies.
Yeah.
Holy hell. It was hilarious. Like he was just as ADHD, but we were just playing off and I was so happy and I was laughing and we were coming up with some of these crazy ideas. And when we finally hung up, and I remember Olivia, who's runs Sego, and then my daughter was sitting there and they were just looking at me and they're like, "There's the old Jon." And I go, "What do you mean?" They go, "We haven't seen that Jon for a long time." Because I just got to be creative, and it was like a dam, and it just whoosh and just blew through, and I had ideas and I loved it, and I was smiling and I was happy, you know. And otherwise at work, I'm just trying to figure out how I'm getting through this day and how we can make everybody, you know, all the businesses work.
Yeah, because you're not, we were talking off camera, you're not an operator.
Right.
Like your job is not an operator. And I think that's so much of life is that we're all trying to get people to fit into a fucking box.
Yeah.
Like, this is your box, fit in this thing. And if you don't fit in this box, well, here you go. But the fact is, you've never fit into a box. Like, you are exploding boxes. So I think it's really knowing who you are, like what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, because ADHD can be one of the most beautiful gifts in the world. If, like you said, if you can find something that you're truly passionate about, excited about. But if you're trying to put together all these pieces and these boxes and, you know, figuring out charts and SOPs and all that stuff, you're like, are you kidding me? Like, I would rather just pour salt in my eyes than sit around and do these, right? Like, this just does not sound enjoyable on any level. So I think it's really understanding like who you are and what your superpower is. And I invite you, even with your own businesses now, as I was saying earlier, and if there's any listeners out there or there's anybody that's viewing this and like, hey, listen, I'm an operator and I could definitely help out Jon here, because you see his absolute creativity and his insights and the way he views things. And understand what we didn't talk about is like most of the stunts you did, you never practiced for them. You were always improvising and you were doing things in the moment because you were creating and you were playing and having fun. But now you've had to go from playing, having fun, creating to trying to structurize and put things into their own little boxes, which you're not great at. Like, you've done fine with your companies. It's not that they're not working, but what happens if you allow you just to be able to do you? You know what I mean? At the fullest capacity, allow someone else to take the thing that you don't enjoy and allow them to do what they really love. You tie those two things together, you have magic. Right. If not, we have chaos. That's why I think most people with ADHD, when they're in school, they don't do well because they're asked to be put into a box and the teacher's teaching them and it has to be this way and it has to be that. And they're like, well, hold on. What if it doesn't? What if it's a whole other thing that nobody's even seen before? What do you think the value of the bear by the time you left management, what do you think was really worth? And I don't mean what it was worth to you. I mean on an economical viability. What do you think the bear was worth? Because people came to see the bear. I mean, it
Wow.
sold tickets.
That's a great question. The the interesting thing about the bear and the value is it became its own brand. I was
Right.
one of the only guys in the league that if I had a ball, it was just the bear on it. Everybody else had to have Seattle or, Portland Trailblazers or, they had to have the team on there as well as the character, but everything I did was branded just bear. And I think I always thought that was kind of an interesting thing because the Jazz never said anything about it. They were just like, yep, you're good. The value, I don't think you can put a price on it. I mean,
No.
really, how do you put a price on? Like, this is a great way to explain it is, if you went out and you bought a billboard, right? How much would that be? 5,000, right?
Sure.
And then now, how much would it be if that billboard could drive around town and people could see it all the time and it's driving
Right.
around town every day? What would you pay for that? And then you go, okay, now take that billboard, it's driving around town. Now it can stop at events and it can get out and hand out branded items. It can hand out stuff, about the games, all that stuff. What would you pay for that? Now you take that and it not only can do that, but now it can go over and it can go to hospitals and it can go to these charity events and it can, be the connection between the Jazz and the fans because now you can hug, kids, you can hug adults and they get to, touch you and high five you and, like, what would you pay for that? So, I mean, it just keeps growing. And, I just don't think NBA teams back in the day were ready for any of that. Like they knew that we needed a mascot, but back then, we were just coming out of a bulldog on a leash, the real animal bulldog. And now all of a sudden they have these characters that can do so much more. They can be so involved in the community, so involved with the team. They can, on a crappy game night, still entertain fans. So,
And the other thing, what I love about your story and what I love about you and actually how we met is you raised millions of dollars for nonprofits and you're still doing it. It's not like it went away. You're still actively raising lots of money for major things that's important to you. What causes are important to you?
all of them. I've never and I don't mean it that way. It's just like my whole thing is because I've dealt with so many different charities. Like I've worked with over 341 different charities.
Wow.
And to sit there and to pick a charity would be hard. And I know a lot of people, it's just like, well, this is what I'm passionate about. That's great. But to me, charity is charity. And I think, a while back, that's why we started working for charities is our whole charity helps other charities. Because I saw so many cool charities start out. They'd, last for maybe 3 years, 4 years, and then they'd fade away because they didn't know how to put on a gala. They didn't know how to run the organization. And that's what I want to do is I want to help these smaller charities, grow. And the one thing that I didn't like, though, is you have these charities that all of a sudden get defensive, and they're just like, I'm basically competing for dollars from these other charities. And I agree, that there is that. But in the end, if I'm a charity and I help out another charity, I mean, it's charity. Charity is charity. It shouldn't matter who you're helping or who's getting the money at the time, because I look at it as if I'm helping you and I'm helping you, somewhere down the road, it'll come back. I mean, that's just the way karma and life is, I believe. And but there's so many people that get protective about their charities and they're not helping anybody else. So I really want to break that mold. I want to go out and help charities by trying to get them to understand that it'll come back if you help, with another charity.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you.
If any of that made sense.
Yeah, no, it did make sense, right? Like, I believe I was actually having this conversation recently with a couple of charities. I was like, listen, if you have these charities that let's say it's children's suicide, right? Like that's a tragic or addiction or whatever it is. Instead of having all these charities compete with each other, why not have them work with each other? So you don't have to go to 20 million galas and like, okay, if you have, this is your need, this is what you're doing with this. This is the type of this is what you need to raise, right? In order to be able to support your initiative. Okay, well, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, then put a bunch of companies together that have a lot of money that they're looking to do donations with, tie them all into one package and say, here you go. Like, you do your part, I do my part, and then we can make more of an impact instead of competing against each other and all of that, which is a lot of noise. So I was at the game a couple nights ago, right? And I was watching the Mascot, the Jazz Bear. And the Jazz Bear, to me, let's just say is, oh man, it's like somebody showing up and putting on an outfit and pretending to be something they're not, versus that you embody this character. And what I see the Jazz Bear perform, or it's like a Disney character more than anything, running up and down, smacking a drum or whatever. How do you feel about seeing something you create that, it's died. It's not the same thing. It looks the same, but it's not the same. How does that make you feel? Or like, that would just be, ooh.
Well, and we kind of talked about it. I really wish that they would have taken the time to find the right person for the character, because when I was done, they put just my old assistant in it, and then what they realized is that he wasn't able to dunk or dance or do this, so then they brought in other guys. So then there were 4 of them, and if there was dance night, the dancer guy would go out. If it was dunking, the dunk guy would go out. So there were all these people doing it, which I think takes away from the character. Because I was really happy that no matter what appearance we were at, it was me, And I loved when Luke would be sitting in the background, and they'd be like, "So who's in the suit?" And they'd be like, "Well, it's the Jazz Bear." No, like, he's not the real guy, but so like, who do you put in it when he comes to things like this? And he's like, no, that's him. And people would just be like, that, like, he came to this event? And it's like, yeah, I really, put a lot of pride in the fact that we did all those appearances. And it was me. And I just wish they would have put more time into finding the right person instead of just a person. But it's what they did.
Yeah, it's just it's so, just to see something you bled for, you broke bones for, you gave so much for it to just be, like you said, just no big deal. It's just another thing, and you built a big brand for it. You don't see the same fan excitement that you used to see for the Bear for this one. It's like, oh, it's just, again, Bear comes out, beats a drum, does some stupid act that I see every single couple nights, the same thing over and over, as if it's just a rerun. But there's none of that like creativity. There's none of that like real heart put into the role. So, but I appreciate I got to at least see that. Like, I really do. I appreciate, like, I got to see that magic that made me say, and I'm going to open up my door and I'm going to slide down the stairs on a perfectly good sled.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate that. And but I really think that it's just the sign of the times. You know what I mean? Like, back when I was doing it, is you had the Grant Harrisons and Nate Randalls and Craig Sander managers that they just said, okay, I trust you. And Grant, famous line when I started, I'm going to give you enough rope to hang yourself. Just don't hang yourself. I pulled on that thing a number of times, but they trusted me to do what I was doing. And, there were a number of times that they were just like, I don't know if this is going to work. And I would be like, trust me. My favorite thing was when I went out to do a skit or a stunt that nobody wanted me to do because they didn't think it was going to work. And we pulled it off and it was amazing. And I'd come off the floor and it was just, it's like your dad, Grant was my dad. And I remember all the time looking over at him immediately when I'd get done. And when he gave me the thumbs up and nodded his head, I was like, that was the best thing. The crowd was great, but seeing Grant give me the thumbs up and say, good job. It was like, your dad patting you on the back because you hit a home run at Little League or something. But I think with what's happening now and with the management that's in, is it's just way easier to have somebody that they can control, that doesn't have any wacky ideas. They have a mascot. They just go out, be seen. We don't have to worry about you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
They're not.
They don't have the liability of it. They don't have to worry about insurance. Don't have to worry about it. I can see that. And it makes sense from that perspective for sure. But I think as a fan, it's super boring. And it's just not exciting on any level.
Well, but don't you see, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like the NBA and some of the other leagues, but they're trying to get everybody to focus on these $1 million players, you know, because like back in the day, there was NBA, which was NBA entertainment. And back in the day, I mean, they had fat guy dancers, old lady dancers, dunk teams, stunt teams. Who else was there? The rollerblading teams. They had all this entertainment. And the NBA was like, holy crap, it's like a 3-ring circus out there. But it was entertaining and it was very family friendly, you know?
Yeah.
But then they kind of went, you know, wait a minute. When Bear or another mascot's in the crowd or whatever it is, and they, you know, it's in the middle of the game and nothing's going on, all of a sudden you hear, you know, 3 sections cheer or laughing. They're watching the mascot. They're
Right.
not watching the game. We have $1 million players
Right.
on the floor, but they're watching this mascot. And I don't think they like that. So then they got rid of NBA. They got rid of all that entertainment. And if you think they're trying to bring it back to that purist, you know, where you watch the game. But in my opinion, the game's not that good. You know, it was better back in the 90s when you were driving under the basket and all this. You know, now everybody's just 3-point shooting. And it's just not as good. I just don't think it's as good. I don't know.
Yeah, they're definitely, I mean, they're looking at their easiest way of leverage, which is getting those 3-point shots, and you see it all the time now in the game. Like, the game has absolutely changed. Used to see that a little bit, but now you see it all the time. And that's how teams are winning now, right? And so they see that's how we win. You don't have the Michael Jordan moments. You know, it's just not the same. I still enjoy it. I still have a lot of fun with it, but it's definitely not the same game I grew up with. Is there anything that we haven't spoke about? This is kind of on your soul and your heart that like you want to talk about?
I mean, I'm happy I woke up this morning.
It's a good thing.
There's a good thing there.
It's a good thing.
No, I honestly, I mean, I think right now, you know, I'm blessed. I'm happy with everything that's going on in my life. But like earlier, we were talking about business and stuff, you know, I wish I was more business savvy. Like I was listening to you and both of us, it felt like kind of started out the same way. You just succeeded way better than I did.
In a different way, right? And I was just saying to you, like, look, no formal education, nothing like that. The key, I think, in my personal success in my life has been surrounding myself with much smarter people than myself. You know what I mean? If I want to know something, I surround myself around those people because I don't know what I don't know. And it goes back to that whole superpower. Like, I have my own superpower, but it is not in doing operations. It is not in that role, right? So I just stick what I'm good at, and I do it really well. But the other things I don't do well, I surround myself around people that do it much better than I do, and I have to trust them. They're going to do it better than I can. Because if not, then I'm trying to do everything, you know. And I think that is a lot of problems with people starting their own companies and having their own businesses because they're like, no, I can do it better. No, I'm gonna, and so it becomes more and more and more and more control, and then you know you're working 80, 90 hours a week because you're exhausted. And I've done it, and I won't do it again. So
nope, nailed it. I think the other thing is that I hear a lot of people talk about is they think that you're going to start a company and you're just going to start making money and it's just going to run. You know what I mean?
no.
And I, as an entrepreneur, I mean, if I could, and I know you could say the same thing, but I think I would just say you have to be ready for that grind. And I don't think I was. I thought I'm just going to step in and this is how it's going to work. And holy hell, it has been a grind. And you need to be prepared for so many ups and downs.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, and nobody knows what it's like to be in the game until they're in the game. It's easy, no different than basketball, to sit up in the cheap seats and tell someone how to run the game and what they should do and how they should do it. Great. Well, having that hindsight, wonderful. You have the hindsight. But it's not until you're in the moment of the game. It's not until you're dealing with, I made a good decision, I made a bad decision. Oh, that cost me legal issues. Oh, this did this, that did this. Like, everything has a price.
Yep.
No different than the character you created has a price. Running a business has a price. Everything in business and life has a price. But you just have to know what is it that you're willing to pay to get what you want. That's it. I mean, that is really the key. And then understanding your own superpower, which we were talking about earlier, which for me, it is ADHD. I won't take meds for it. It drives people fucking crazy in my life constantly. I'm like, I don't know. Ask so-and-so. I don't remember. Yeah. And it's not because I don't care. It's because like those little details, they get lost somewhere. I'm like, I don't know what vault I put it in. It's somewhere there. Like and I know I drive people insane, but part of that is the geniusness in it, right?
Yep.
Like I always try to have like notes and stuff like that. I prepare myself well for interviews, but when I get here, I have a whole phone full of notes. But that's not this heart to heart conversation. And I would much rather be genuine and authentic and speak from that place with preparedness than try to do something that's canned and scripted and some bullshit that everybody else does out there.
100%.
No different than what you were doing, you know? So when all's said and done, when it's the end and you have been laid to rest, what do you want to be remembered for? You've created this character, but what do you want to be remembered for?
I don't know, and I say this to my kids sometimes is that, for them to make sure that when you leave this earth that you leave a footprint on it. And I think my biggest goal is, I feel like my success or my value will come if I have a full church. So I don't know.
A full church?
Yep.
Explain to me. What does that mean?
Just friends, family.
Oh,
I just
okay.
know, because it isn't about, I'm not a money guy. And it isn't about creating this a mass amount of wealth. To me, that's once again, that's selfish. And what I want to die with is, and I feel that I'll be the richest at is, or I want to be the richest at is relationships. I want real friends. I want close family. And I just want everybody to celebrate the fact that we had time together in this, however many years of my life. I still have friends from first grade.
Wow.
5 friends from my little town that all started first grade together. We're still friends. I love relationships, and I don't care if I met you once. If I see you again, I want to treat you like we're friends and that I've known you, even though I met you once. But I will treat you great because I don't know. I think life's too short to worry about, money that you can't take with you.
Beautiful answer. I noticed the moment you and I met, I was like, man, I'm going to do forever. Like you're very genuine. You're open. You're full of love. Like, I can't imagine the amount of hugs that you've given over your lifetime. I mean, you probably get more hugs than anybody I can think of.
There's a ton.
You know what I mean? All that love.
I'm a hugger.
All that love, though. I mean, from the bear side of things to your side, I'm like, wow, that's so much love to be giving. Yes. The conversation always goes a lot with people when I have they're like, listen, I don't care about the money. I don't care about any of these things. And I think it's two sides. Yes, I think that money is an important tool to create change.
Right.
Like it is. So I publicly very much want to accumulate a bunch of money, but not to accumulate to be like, ooh, look how ego I am. Look at the cars and houses and all that stuff. It's like, but there are a lot of forces out there in the world that are working in the opposition of things I believe that are good, that are actually helping humanity. They're actually pushing things forward. And with technology shifting, there's got to be other people that are out there that think, hey, you know what? If I do accumulate those finances and I do those things, I really can change the world because other people are going to do it either way. And so I say that just mainly to our listeners because it's so often said that like we demonize wealth, right? And say, well, you can't have this one or this one. And I say you can have both.
Yep.
I say you can have great friends, you can have wealth, you can have a spiritual alignment, relationships, you can have beautiful relationships with friends and family and making an impact and doing really good things in the world. I don't think it has to be one or the other. But what you said about having a full church, I mean, it's not much, you go to someone's funeral and you're like, man, like that person accumulated a lot of money, but they were miserable fucking human beings.
Yep.
Like, what was the point in all that?
And I agree with you on the money thing. I think if you can really set yourself up for that, where you can make money and use it for change and use it for good and use it for, bettering other people's lives. Because I don't think that there's anything better than giving. You know what I mean? Like, there's studies that show that, when you do something nice for somebody, your serotonin levels, my serotonin, if I do something nice for you, go up. Your serotonin levels go up. And, even you watching this happen, your serotonin levels go up. So, I mean, there's proof that just the act of giving helps so many people. And I don't know. I just fully believe, like my kid said one time, we were all talking about winning the lottery or whatever. And it was kind of cool. My daughter looks at me and she goes, you'd give it all away anyway, And I was just like, yeah, I really would. I know everybody around me wouldn't have any more bills. I know that because I just, and maybe part of it is me just not me accepting the fact that I won't ever be that wealthy. So it's easier to say. So it's easier to say,
You're like, it's like the cheap seats once again. You're like, you know what? If I had it all, I would just give it away anyways.
Who needs it?
No big deal.
And maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But I just, I just don't ever expect to be super wealthy.
Do you play the lottery?
No.
Well, then there you go.
I need to win the lottery. The lottery ain't going to help me. But I would, and I know it, and maybe it is just my cop-out way of doing it. I don't know. But I do know.
I mean, for your kids to say that, it says
honest.
something about you, though. That says really something about you. Well, man, I
tried to be honest.
I appreciate our conversation. I appreciate your
great.
openness and to have just a raw conversation about things, because you did give so much of your life towards this character, and you're a character in yourself, right? But you gave so much to that, to now being recreating yourself. Is there anything, and I believe I know what it is, but is there anything, if there are listeners out there that are listening in, they're saying, hey, listen, I can help you. How can they reach you? Is there anything that you need from them? Because you don't like asking. You love to give a lot, but you don't like asking for help. So this is your opportunity. Who knows what can happen? We're accessing the internet. We're accessing, who knows who's could be listening. And I believe everything happens in the right timing. But is there anything that you could actually use right now in your life that would better your life, your business, your family, your community?
A hug.
I'll give you a hug right after this.
Hugs.
Don't worry about it. I'll give you a hug, no problem.
I don't know. I feel weird. But I guess, like any business, the one thing I did wrong in business is I did 5. But if I could do it over, I should have done 1, and I think it would have been easier. But I think what I'm struggling with, like you said, is somebody that could, mentor me and just say, okay, I'm going to come in, I'm going to watch and see what you're doing, and let's figure this out, because I am all over the place. Because I'm getting pulled by every business all the time, and I'm, the phone call, and I just need somebody to come in and just be like, okay, because I tried to go Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I'm doing Rocky Mountain Mascots, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to work on Sago, and I'll goes to hell first 5 minutes after I wake up.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, and we talked, is, I did this all without capital. And when you don't have capital, your progress is so slow,
Yes. And you're chasing multiple things. I think the first thing I would tell you if I came in would be to look at all your books, find out what's creating the most amount of revenue. And if it's not creating you very much revenue, from that perspective, I would cut it, because it's taking resources. It's taking mental energy. It's taking physical energy. It's taking heart energy. It's taking, it's taking capital from some perspectives and just dwindle it, just cutting down until you've got 1 or 2 single points of focus, because all the other stuff is just distractions.
Well, honestly, we tried to do that. It's kind of funny. I tried to kind of slow Rocky Mountain down. I thought, okay, with a small staff, if we just do 1 mascot a month, or 2 mascots a month, we'll make money, And then all of a sudden, Segos didn't get any orders for about a month, and Rocky Mountain, I was getting mascot orders left and right. And then I was like, well, what the hell? So Sago, who I was thinking I'm going to just push on and kind of grow that and then jump in. But then all of a sudden, Rocky Mountain is the one that took off. And I was like, what the, what do you do? So I was.
Well, it seems like you got 2 businesses or 3 businesses that move really well,
It's just like,
it's getting that operator.
I put time in here.
Getting an operator.
It'll start to grow. Then I move over here. This will drop. This will grow. So I'm spinning plates.
Yep.
So
getting an operator in all of each one of those divisions to grow it, what I believe will be one of the best things you could do. Like full on, 1 business at a time, get an operator, and push it forward. I am not that guy. I literally
heard it. He said
I literally said I am not an operator. That is what I said. I love them, and they're worth their weight in gold. But
our ADHD together would be amazing.
Yeah, we would run around in circles with each other, and this would be great.
Putting on costumes, running around.
Well, man, I really appreciate you coming out to the show. I appreciate you coming in And man, we'll have to maybe, do this some other time. And
I would love
I'm
to.
really, really grateful. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. This was great. I
All right,
appreciate
man.
it.
Cheers.
Thanks, big man.
Absolutely, man.